Welcome to the Unveiled Epicheco's channel. Today, we're diving deep into an unexplored historical mystery in the sun-baked sands of ancient Africa, where the whispers of forgotten winds carry tales of impossible triumphs and shadowy secrets long buried beneath the dunes. Imagine yourself drifting back through the mists of time to the year 46 BC, when the mighty Roman general Julius Caesar, a man whose ambition burned brighter than the Mediterranean sun, found himself stranded on foreign shores with a mere handful of loyal soldiers. Facing an overwhelming horde of fierce Numidian warriors, their spears glinting like stars in the twilight. But this is no ordinary battle recounting. No, this is a hidden saga of intrigue, betrayal, and mystical forces that history books dare not mention. A story where the veil between the mortal world and the ancient gods thins, revealing truths that could reshape our understanding of courage and fate itself, as Caesar's ship creaked against the rocky coast of now modern-day Tunisia. He stepped onto the parched earth with only about 1,000 men at his side, veterans hardened by years of Gallic wars, their armor and their eyes weary yet unyielding. They had come to crush the remnants of Pompey's forces, led by the cunning Titus, a former ally turned bitter foe, who commanded a vast army of 16,000, including swift Numidian cavalry that moved like shadows across the plains. But unknown to the chroniclers of old, there was a deeper mystery afoot. Whispers among the locals spoke of an ancient artifact hidden in the nearby ruins, a golden amulet said to harness the power of the desert gods, granting its bearer unparalleled strategic insight or perhaps even the ability to bend the winds of war. Caesar, ever the opportunist, had heard these legends during his time in Egypt, where he with Cleopatra, and now, as his scouts returned with tales of massive encampment, he pondered if this relic could be the key to turning the tide. The air was thick with the scent of olive groves and salt from the sea, mingling with the distant cries of exotic birds, as Caesar gathered his centurions under a canopy of stars. His voice low and commanding, laced with that charisma that made men follow him into the jaws of hell. "My brothers," he murmured, the firelight dancing on his aquiline features. "We are outnumbered, outmaneuvered, but Rome was not built on numbers alone. Tonight, we seek not just victory, but the secrets that these sands guard." Among his men was a grizzled legionary with a scar across his cheek from a Gaulish axe, a man haunted by dreams of his lost family back in, and beside him stood young, barely out of boyhood, whose wide eyes hid a sharp mind attuned to the omens of the gods. Little did they know that, too, sought the amulet, driven by a personal vendetta against Caesar, fueled by a hidden betrayal from their shared past, when Caesar had spared life in a forgotten skirmish, only for envy to fester like a wound. As dawn broke with a golden hue over the horizon, painting the landscape in soft, ethereal light, Caesar's small force marched out from their makeshift camp, the ground crunching softly under their sandaled feet, the air cool and crisp, carrying the faint aroma of wild herbs that soothed the soul even as tension built. They formed a tight cohort, shields interlocked in a testudo formation that resembled a living fortress, but the Numidians under command swarmed like locusts, their horses thundering across the plain, arrows whistling through the air like vengeful spirits. The battle erupted in a chaos of clashing metal and shouts that echoed off the distant hills. Yet amid the frenzy, Caesar spotted a lone rider breaking from the enemy lines, a cloaked figure clutching something that gleamed in the sunlight. Could it be the amulet, he wondered, his heart quickening with a mix of warrior's instinct and scholarly curiosity. For Caesar was not just a conqueror, but a seeker of knowledge, versed in the arcane lore of the ancients. Dispatching and on a daring flanking maneuver, he charged forward, his sword drawn, the wind whipping his crimson cloak like a banner of defiance. The Numidians, fierce warriors with sun-darkened skin and intricate tattoos honoring their tribal deities, fought with a ferocity born of defending their homeland. Their leader, a chieftain named, whose name meant strong in their tongue, had allied with not out of loyalty to Pompey, but to protect a sacred site where the amulet was said to rest, a forgotten temple swallowed by the sands centuries ago, during the time of Carthage's glory, as the Romans pushed back wave after wave, their discipline holding against the onslaught, and slipped through the melee, their breath steady and measured, the sun warming their backs as they navigated rocky outcrops dotted with sparse acacia trees, whose leaves rustled gently like a lullaby from nature itself. They discovered the rider felled by a stray arrow, the amulet clutched in his lifeless hand, an ornate piece of gold etched with symbols that seemed to pulse with an inner light, whispering forgotten incantations that spoke of visions and foresight. But as touched it, a vision flooded his mind, revealing a plot twist that chilled his blood. Was not the true mastermind, no, behind him lurked a shadowy figure, a Roman senator in exile, one who had orchestrated the alliance with the Numidians through secret pacts sealed in moonlit rituals, aiming to claim the amulet for his own bid at power, overthrowing both Caesar and the remnants of the Republic. The tension rose as the battle intensified. Caesar's men, though few, used the terrain to their advantage, channeling the enemy into narrow passes where their superior infantry could shine, shields clanging in rhythmic unity, a soothing cadence amidst the storm. Spears thrusting with precision honed from countless drills, the Numidians' charges broke like waves on a steadfast cliff, their horses neighing in confusion as riders fell, the ground growing slick with the earth's quiet acceptance. Yet atop his stallion, his forces with a roar that cut through the din, his eyes locking on Caesar across the field, memories flashing of their shared campaigns, the laughter around campfires now turned to bitter ash. But as and raced back with the amulet. A sandstorm brewed on the horizon, unnatural in its timing, swirling with ethereal whispers that hinted at divine intervention. The gods of the desert, perhaps El or from Carthaginian lore, awakening to the disturbance of their relic. The winds howled softly at first, then built to a gentle fury that blinded the Numidians, their formations scattering like leaves in autumn's breeze, allowing Caesar's thousand to strike with renewed vigor. Plot twists unfolded as the Numidian chieftain, confronted in a hidden glade amid the chaos, revealing that the amulet was not a weapon but a key to a lost library of knowledge, scrolls buried deep that held cures for plagues, maps to hidden oases and prophecies of empires' falls, consumed by greed, slew in a moment of rage. But the act invoked a curse, his horse bolting into the storm, carrying him toward doom. Meanwhile, Caesar, now holding the amulet, felt its power course through him, granting glimpses of the future. Not just of this battle, but of his own fate, the Ides of March looming like a distant thundercloud, yet in this moment, it sharpened his tactics, his voice calm and reassuring as he directed his men. "Hold the line, my friends, for Rome and for the secrets we uncover today." The climax built as the storm peaked, the Romans encircling the disoriented enemy, their swords flashing in the diffused light, Numidians falling in droves, their war cries fading into echoes of resignation. Abandoned by his allies, faced Caesar in single combat, their blades clashing with the weight of personal history. "You were my brother once," Caesar whispered, his tone laced with sorrow rather than triumph. But eyes wild, lunged with desperation, only to be disarmed, the amulet's vision revealing his treachery's depth in a twist of mercy tinged with strategy. Caesar spared him, binding him as a prisoner, but not before extracting the truth of his involvement. A hidden puppet master who would later play a role in greater betrayals. As the storm subsided, the sun setting in a blaze of crimson and gold, painting the battlefield in hues that soothed the weary souls, Caesar's 1,000 stood victorious. The 16,000 rooted, fleeing into the twilight with tales of supernatural defeat. The hidden story revealed that the battle was not won by might alone, but by the unveiling of ancient mysteries. The amulet returned to the sands. Its power too dangerous for mortal hands, yet its lessons etched into Caesar's mind, shaping his conquests to come, found peace in the victory. His dreams turning to hopes of reunion, while forever changed, became a keeper of secrets, whispering them to the winds, and so, in the quiet aftermath, under a canopy of stars that twinkled like benevolent eyes, the men rested, their breaths sinking with the gentle rhythm of the sea, the forgotten truths of drifting into legend. A testament to how one day, against all odds, courage intertwined with mystery to forge destiny anew. Where the golden sands of ancient Africa hold secrets of a battle that all odds, a clash where Julius Caesar's mere 1,000 men stood against a roaring tide of 16,000 warriors. But beneath the surface of this legendary confrontation, it lies a web of hidden alliances, mystical artifacts, and forgotten prophecies that the annals of history have shrouded in silence. Picture yourself reclining on soft cushions as the evening light fades, the gentle hum of distant waves lulling you into a tranquil state, while we unravel this tale of ambition, betrayal, and the whispers of the gods themselves. It was the winter of 46 BC, the air crisp with the scent of salt from the Mediterranean Sea mingling with the earthy aroma of olive trees dotting the Tunisian landscape. Julius Caesar, the brilliant strategist whose conquests had already etched his name into eternity, had crossed from Sicily with a fleet battered by storms. Landing near the town with only a skeleton force, supplies were scarce, the local populace wary, and word had spread like wildfire through the dunes that Titus, once Caesar's trusted lieutenant in the Gallic wars, now a sworn enemy aligned with the remnants of Pompey's, was marshaling a vast army to crush this audacious invasion before it could take root. But unknown to the scribes who would later pen the official accounts, Caesar's arrival was no mere military gambit. Rumors among the Berber tribes spoke of an ancient Carthaginian relic, the Eye of, a sapphire-encrusted talisman buried in the ruins of an old temple near, said to grant its possessor visions of enemy movements and the favor of the desert wines, a forgotten truth passed down through generations of Numidian shamans. Caesar, ever the scholar of the arcane, had learned of it during his sojourn in Egypt, where Cleopatra's priests had shared scrolls hinting at its power. Now, as his men fortified their camp with hastily dug trenches and wooden palisades, the general pondered if this artifact could be the key to turning desperation into dominance. Among his loyal 1,000 were men like Quintus, a veteran centurion with a weathered face from battles in Gaul, his broad shoulders carrying the weight of lost comrades, yet his spirit unbroken, dreaming of a peaceful farm in the hills of where he could tend vines under the sun. Then there was Young, disguised as a male auxiliary to fight alongside her brother who had fallen in, her keen eyes and quick wits making her an invaluable scout, and the enigmatic scribe named, a Greek freedman who claimed descent from Punic scholars, his knowledge of ancient languages unlocking maps that led to hidden oases and forgotten paths. As the sun dipped low, casting long shadows over the arid plains, Caesar gathered them in his tent. The flickering oil lamps illuminating papyrus scrolls spread across a rough table. "We are few," he said, his voice a soothing baritone that commanded without raising like a father guiding his children through a storm. "But the gods favor the bold, and these sands hide more than enemies. They guard secrets that could make us invincible." Little did they know that, encamped miles away with his 16,000, a mix of Roman defectors, fierce Numidian horsemen, and Gallic mercenaries, was driven not just by republican zeal, but by a personal vendetta. Years ago in Gaul, Caesar had overlooked for a key promotion, a slight that festered into hatred, and now, allied with the Numidian king Juba, whose warriors numbered in the thousands, had his own spies seeking the eye of, believing it would ensure his triumph and perhaps even a throne of his own. The night deepened, stars emerging like diamonds on black velvet, their twinkling a calming rhythm against the soft rustle of palm fronds in the breeze, slipped out under cover of darkness, her footsteps silent on the sandy ground, guided by translations of an old tablet. She ventured toward the ruins, ancient stones weathered by time, overgrown with thorny acacias that scratched like whispers from the past. There, in a crumbling chamber where moonlight filtered through cracks, she unearthed a chest bound in leather. Inside gleamed the eye, its sapphire pulsing faintly as if alive. But as she clutched it, visions assailed her, flashes of charging cavalry, betrayal in the ranks, and a shadowy figure pulling strings from afar, racing back to camp, her heart pounding in sync with the distant drum of Numidian war chants. She delivered the relic to Caesar, who felt its warmth in his palm, igniting glimpses of the morrow's battle. The dawn broke gently, the sky a canvas of soft pinks and golds, birdsong mingling with the low murmurs of awakening soldiers. Caesar's 1,000 formed up, their armor polished to a dull sheen, shields interlocking in a wall of resolve. They marched out to forage, but scouts soon reported the horizon darkening with dust clouds. Horde approaching, 16,000 strong, their Numidian cavalry swirling like a desert storm, spears tipped with iron that caught the light, led by the chieftain, a towering figure with tribal scars mapping his victories, whose loyalty to Juba was tempered by ancient grudges against Rome's encroachment. The clash began with a deceptive calm, sending forth light skirmishers to probe, arrows arcing gracefully through the air like falling stars. But Caesar's men held, their testudo formation a living shell, the eye in Caesar's hand whispering tactics. "Extend the line," it seemed to urge, and he did, thinning his ranks to envelop, a move that surprised even Quintus, who grumbled but obeyed. The tension built slowly, like a gathering wave as Numidian horsemen charged, their hooves thundering softly at first, then building to a resonant hum that vibrated through the earth. From a flanking position loosed arrows with precision, felling riders who tumbled like leaves in autumn. But the numbers pressed, 16,000 against one, the air thick with dust and the metallic tang of blood. Yet amid the fray, a plot twist unfolded. One of its captains, a man named Sextus, revealed as a double agent planted by Caesar months prior, slipped through the lines to report that Juba's forces were divided, a faction of Numidians secretly resenting their king's alliance with Rome's enemies, seeking independence. This hidden truth, a forgotten schism from Carthaginian days, could be exploited. Caesar, calm as a still pond, signaled a feigned retreat, drawing the enemy deeper into a narrow valley where hidden archers waited. The mystery deepened as the eye showed visions of an underground spring, a natural trap where the ground softened, bogging down the heavy cavalry. Sensing the shift, hesitated, his warriors whispering of omens, birds flying against the wind. A sign from herself, furious, pushed forward, his Gallic mercenaries clashing shields with Caesar's veterans in a symphony of steel, grunts, and labored breaths. Quintus fought like a lion, his sword a blur, protecting young recruits who faltered under the onslaught. But as the sun climbed higher, warming the air with a gentle embrace, the tide turned. Caesar's 1,000, inspired by their leader's unyielding poise, reformed into wedges, piercing the enemy lines. The Numidians, harried by visions and division, began to fracture, turning on in a moment of revelation. His spear finding the traitor's mount, a twist born from the artifact's influence, perhaps, or the weight of ancient prophecies foretelling Rome's shadow over Africa. The climax crested like a wave breaking on shore, Caesar confronting across a bloodied field. Their eyes locking in a gaze heavy with shared history. "Brother, no more," snarled. His voice ragged, but Caesar, with the eye's foresight, a lethal blow, disarming him not with force but with words of mercy. "The Republic dies not here but in the hearts of men like you." The battle wound down as the sun arced westward, the 16,000 scattering into the dunes, leaving behind echoes of defeat, casualties mounting among them while Caesar's 1,000, though weary and wounded, stood tall. Perhaps only 100 fallen, their sacrifice a testament to discipline over numbers in the aftermath as campfires flickered under a starlit sky. The gentle crackle soothing frayed nerves. Caesar buried the eye back in the ruins, its power too perilous, but not before it revealed one final forgotten truth. A prophecy of his own end, daggers in the Senate. A warning he chose to heed in strategy rather than fear. Quintus found solace in letters home, revealed her secret, and was honored as a hero. Chronicled the hidden stories for posterity, lost scrolls that would one day resurface in dusty libraries. The battle of not just a victory, but an unveiling of mysteries where fate, artifact, and human will intertwine, shaping the empire's course in ways the world would never fully know. And as the night deepened, the sands whispering lullabies of peace, the men drifted into sleep, their dreams woven with the calm of triumph earned. On January 4th, 46 CE, the maximum outstanding military commander in history stood on African sand, watching 16,000 enemy warriors surround his 1,000 guys. Julius Caesar had come to Africa to search out the ultimate remnants of faction. However, now he faced annihilation inside the barren hills outside. Photo this. 1,000 Roman soldiers, their purple cloaks brilliant towards yellow sand, absolutely encircled via Numidian cavalry, whose battle cries echoed off the rocky outcrops like thunder from men. Approaching typhoon. The mathematics had been simple and terrifying. 16 enemies for each Roman. No reinforcements within 50 mi. No getaway route through the swirling mass of horsemen who moved like desert wind, performing and vanishing in the back of clouds of dust that became the afternoon sun into a blood-purple disk. Caesar's political situation turned into more desperate than the majority. The civil war that had torn Rome apart for years became speculated to cease with loss of life in Egypt. However, the younger end had rebuilt republican resistance in North Africa. They commanded 60,000 men, which includes King Juba's mythical Numidian cavalry, warriors who have been born within the saddle and will put 3 arrows inside the air earlier than a Roman ought to draw his gladius. Back in Rome, Caesar's enemies waited like vultures. One main defeat, one broken legion, and they would strip him of the entirety. This wasn't just another marketing campaign. It became Caesar's very last gamble for absolute energy. The morning had started out as habitual as any other. Foraging day trip. Caesar wanted materials for his 6 undermanned legions camped close to the coast. African grain became scarce, water even scarcer, and his guys have been consuming half of rations for weeks. The local terrain favored his enemies completely. Not like Gaul's forests and rivers, Africa supplied infinite open plains in which cavalry should maneuver freely, while Roman heavy infantry suffocated in formations designed for European battle. The temperature that January day climbed beyond 90 through morning, and Roman armor became an oven that cooked men inside their personal bronze and leather-based. Right here's what the chronicles don't tell you about Caesar's tactical blindness that morning. His Germanic cavalry, the equal horsemen who had won, had been absolutely useless in African conditions. Their heavy mounts couldn't in shape Numidian pace. Their guns were wrong for desert battle, and they had in no way faced enemies who may want to shoot backwards even as chickening out at full gallop. Caesar's intelligence approximately enemy numbers was catastrophically incorrect. His scouts mentioned some 100 Numidian raiders. The fact turned into King Juba's greatest cavalry, 16,000 strong, commanded by using Caesar's former lieutenant, who knew every Roman tactical formation due to the fact he had helped ideal them. The trap were months in preparation. Cart and understood Caesar's weak point. He needed victories, needed them speedy, needed them spectacularly. A careful, patient enemy should make the most his aggression by supplying what regarded to be smooth objectives. The foraging task changed into perfect bait. Caesar couldn't face up to leading it in my view, bringing simply enough men to seem bold, however now not enough to continue to exist what was coming. The enemy had studied Roman logistics, Roman movement patterns, Roman psychology. They knew Caesar would take risks others wouldn't dare. As the dirt clouds first seemed on the horizon, Caesar's centurions need to have ordered immediate retreat to the coast. Popular doctrine demanded withdrawal while facing superior cavalry. Numbers in open terrain. However, Caesar had spent 6 years in Gaul, proving that trendy doctrine became for ordinary commanders. And the greatest army genius in records changed into approximately to find out that African war accompanied absolutely unique guidelines. The Numidians moved like water flowing around stone, surrounding the Roman column without seeming to attack, simply watching, waiting, letting fear do their work for them. What took place subsequent would test whether or not Roman discipline should conquer mathematical impossibility, whether or not. Tactical genius may want to defeat 16-1 odds, and whether or not Caesar's legendary fortune might preserve within the burning barren region wherein empires got here to die. The Numidian cavalry struck like a desert sandstorm, acting anywhere at once, but by no means quite close sufficient for Roman metal to reach. Via the second 1 hour of what Caesar had deliberate as a simple foraging day trip, his 1,000 men located themselves trapped in a nightmare of mobility and precision that European battle had by no means organized them for. The enemy horsemen rode in perfect circles across the Roman formation, staying just beyond javelin variety, losing arrows in coordinated volleys that fell like lethal rain on shields raised in opposition to the merciless African sun. Every circuit brought fresh riders, while exhausted horses have been rotated to the rear, growing an infinite cycle of harassment that Roman heavy infantry had no solution for. Commanded the Numidian swarm with intimate expertise of Roman weaknesses. Caesar's former lieutenant had spent years getting to know how legions moved, how they reacted under strain. Now he used that understanding like a healthcare professional's knife, probing for gentle spots in formations he had as soon as helped design. The Numidians feinted costs that pressured Romans into protecting squares, then wheeled away on the closing 2D, leaving Caesar's guys gasping in bronze armor that trapped heat like furnaces. Every false attack tired electricity the Romans couldn't spare. Every retreat mocked their incapability to close with enemies who fought like ghosts manufactured from dust and arrows. The killing started in earnest as the solar reached its peak. Numidian javelins observed gaps among shields with surgical precision. Men who had survived Gaul's forests and Germanic expenses fell to guns they couldn't even see coming. Launched from horseback by warriors who should hit a target at full gallop from 50 yards. The wounded couldn't be evacuated due to the fact there was nowhere to head. They lay inside the middle of the formation, their groans adding mental stress to physical exhaustion. Roman field held. However, Caesar may want to see doubt creeping into veteran faces as arrows persisted to fall, and no Roman weapon may want to reach lower back. Then everything changed, whilst the Numidians discovered the proper scope of their lure. What Caesar had taken for random harassment become honestly hurrying. The enemy cavalry had been using his formation steadily southeast, far away from the coast, far away from any desire of retreat to his base camp. The Romans discovered themselves in a natural amphitheater of low hills wherein cavalry ought to assault from elevation, even as infantry struggled uphill through unfastened sand that grabbed at their sandals like quicksand. Right here's what army historians miss about this moment. Caesar found out he had been outgeneraled through his personal former student. Wasn't just commanding Numidians. He became accomplishing a symphony of destruction that used Roman predictability towards Roman strength. The mental warfare proved as devastating as the physical assaults. Numidian struggle cries echoed off the hills, in languages Romans failed to understand, creating an alien soundtrack of drawing close doom. The enemy horsemen displayed captured Roman requirements from earlier defeats, taunting Caesar's guise with evidence that other legions had already fallen to African methods. Some Numidians rode near sufficient to shout Latin insults found out from deserters, calling the Romans cowards who concealed at the back of shields because they feared honest fight. Each taunt became calculated to initiate Romans into breaking formation, into charging after enemies who could melt away and return with arrows. With the aid of the fourth hour, Caesar faced a disaster that threatened to wreck greater than just his navy. His Germanic cavalry, the horsemen who had received him Gaul, proved entirely insufficient against Numidian mobility. Their heavy mounts and European strategies have been like siege engines in a foot race. When they charged, the Numidians scattered like startled birds, only to reform and attack the now isolated Germans from behind. 3 separate cavalry actions ended, with Caesar's horsemen streaming lower back to the protection of the infantry squares, their mounts and exhausted even as the enemy regarded as sparkling as morning. The mathematics of attrition had been becoming impossible to disregard. Roman arrows were finite, water became walking low, and the African solar was turning armor into devices of torture. Meanwhile, the Numidians regarded to multiply as opposed to lessen. Clean squadrons acting on distant ridges like mirages that resolved into lethal reality. Caesar counted enemy banners from a dozen exceptional tribes, all united beneath Juba's authority and tactical genius. What he faced wasn't just cavalry. It turned into a confederation of the finest light horsemen in the ancient world. Warriors whose ancestors were fighting, installed struggle on account that earlier than Rome become founded. Then Caesar did something no Roman preferred had ever attempted in open war in opposition to cavalry. Caesar's revolutionary selection emerged from pure desperation, converted into tactical genius. Instead of keeping the conventional Roman rectangular formation that made his men sitting goals for Numidian arrows, he ordered something by no means earlier than attempted against cavalry in open terrain. His 1,000 legionaries could shape a single prolonged line, 4 men deep, stretching almost half of a mile across the valley ground. To every centurion who heard the command, it sounded like suicide. Extended lines were for preventing infantry, now not cellular horsemen who may want to pay attention their complete force in opposition to any susceptible factor. However, Caesar had visible something in the Numidian attack styles that even had overlooked. The transformation took 20 mins of agonizing vulnerability. Roman centuries wheeled and prolonged even as arrows persevered to fall. Men dropping as they struggled to hold formation at some stage in the most dangerous maneuver in historic war. The Numidians pressed their benefit, sensing Roman confusion, sending wave after wave of horsemen against what seemed to be a formation in entire disarray. Caesar moved alongside the line individually, his purple cloak making him a goal for each enemy archer. But his presence kept exhausted legionaries from breaking as they extended into what gave the look of a human sacrifice to Numidian mobility. Here's in which legend meets tactical reality. Caesar wasn't simply playing on courage against mathematics. He had identified the deadly flaw in Numidian methods that now not even understood. The enemy cavalry's finest electricity, their capability to pay attention. Overwhelming force in opposition to any point required them to mass together for max effect. However, massing horsemen created vulnerability in terrain, in which maneuver area was limited. Caesar's prolonged line could force the Numidians to select between attacking in small organizations, negating their numerical benefit, or concentrating in regions wherein the surrounding hills might restriction their breakout routes. The first test came when 2,000 Numidian horsemen charged the Roman middle, waiting for to shatter the skinny line like pottery. Against stone, Instead, they found themselves funneled between rocky outcrops into a killing region in which Roman javelins ought to reach them, and their personal mobility have become a liability. The legionaries did not try to preserve floor within the conventional feel. They gave way in calculated retreats that drew the horsemen deeper into terrain that preferred heavy infantry. Whilst the Numidians wheeled to escape, they observed themselves trapped between converging Roman wings that had closed just like the jaws of a lure. The slaughter in that slender valley backside lasted much less than 10 mins, but changed everything. Numidian horses, bred for speed on open plains, came across loose rocks and thorny scrub. Riders who had terrorized Romans all morning all of a sudden observed themselves inside gladius variety of veterans who were ready hours for this second. The sound of iron on bone echoed off the hillsides as Roman subject met Numidian desperation in close combat that favored neither velocity nor arrows but pure savagery. 300 enemy horsemen died in that valley, their bodies marking the primary Roman achievement of an afternoon that had appeared destined for disaster. But Caesar's tactical masterstroke went beyond that single engagement. The extended line created a couple of simultaneous combats throughout the valley, stopping from coordinating his forces effectively. Instead of one overwhelming attack, the Numidians found themselves preventing dozens of smaller movements wherein their mobility advantage disappeared, and Roman schooling had become decisive. Century by using century, with the aid of the legionaries proved that near combat remained their area irrespective of how many arrows had fallen on their shields. The psychological effect rippled through both armies quicker than battlefield messengers should carry news. Roman cheers rose from the valley floor as men who were making ready to die suddenly saw victory within attain. Conversely, Numidian warfare cries faltered as warriors who had in no way confronted effective resistance from Roman infantry watched their comrades fall in terrain that have to have favored cavalry. The mathematical reality of 16-to-1 odds started out wavering as tactical innovation met cultural arrogance in fight that neither aspect had anticipated. Watched his perfect trap transform into Caesar's killing floor, and understood that his former commander had once more rewritten the guidelines of conflict. The Numidian advantage required open terrain and freedom to move. Caesar had used the landscape itself to neutralize each turning African geography against African methods with a precision that most effective years of European campaigning may want to have taught him. What came about inside the subsequent half-hour might determine whether or not tactical genius should overcome numerical impossibility, whether Roman innovation may want to defeat Numidian culture, and whether Caesar's mythical fortune extended to African sand. The decisive moment arrived while Caesar identified that had dedicated his reserve cavalry to reinforce the failed valley attack. In 17 minutes of calculated audacity, Caesar might either vindicate his tactical revolution or watch his final army die on African sand. The Roman line had held through 3 separate Numidian fees, but Caesar should see exhaustion etching traces on veteran faces below bronze helmets that had grown to be furnaces in the wilderness heat. Sweat mixed with blood on gladius hilts made guns slippery. The wounded lay in growing numbers in the back of the prolonged formation, their groans a steady reminder that Roman patience had limits. Even tactical genius could not amplify indefinitely. Then Caesar noticed the hole that might define his legend. Had pulled warriors from his left wing to support the valley engagement, creating a gap within the Numidian encirclement almost 300 wide extensive. It became a fleeting possibility, visible most effective to a commander who understood each Roman and enemy psychology. Caesar had perhaps 5 mins before Numidian mobility closed the distance. 5 minutes to reap what no Roman navy had controlled in opposition to superior cavalry in open African terrain. He might not simply smash the encirclement. He might shatter it so absolutely that mental shock would multiply tactical success into strategic victory. The rate began with Caesar's private intervention that became army legend. Taking 2 centuries of his greatest veterans, guys who had accompanied him from Gaul via civil conflict to African exile. He led them individually towards the space in enemy traces. His pink cloak streamed in the back of him as he ran, making him seen to every Roman. A Numidian at the battlefield. The sight in their commander charging, taking walks, converted exhausted legionaries into an unstoppable human battering ram. Centuries that had been barely maintaining protective positions abruptly observed power for offensive motion that confounded both mathematics and military logic. The impact whilst Romans met Numidians inside the gap created a valley that witnesses defined as thunder wrapped in screaming. Horses reared and fell as located their bellies. Riders who had terrorized infantry all. Morning unexpectedly confronted disciplined metal in terrain, wherein pace intended not anything and schooling everything. The collision lasted possibly 3 minutes, but the one's mins determined the struggle. Roman heavy infantry, designed for near fight, proved devastating against cavalry caught without room to move. Every sword stroke changed into calculated, every defend push coordinated. Each step forward sold with Numidian blood that darkened the sand underneath there. Here's what came about next that army historians nonetheless debate. The step forward created a cascade effect that no tactical manual had ever defined. As Caesar's attack pressure punched through enemy traces, the prolonged Roman formation all at once gotten smaller like a remaining fist. As opposed to keeping their protecting stance, the legionaries began advancing simultaneously throughout the entire valley. What were a desperate shielding motion transformed into a coordinated offensive that stuck 16,000 Numidians, absolutely unprepared for Roman aggression in terrain that they had managed all day. Watched his tactical masterpiece collapse in real time as Roman field met Numidian confusion in dozens of separate combats. His horsemen, skilled for mobility war, discovered themselves preventing at near quarters in which their advantages disappeared, and Roman guns ruled. The psychological shock rippled through tribal contingents that had by no means confronted powerful infantry resistance. Warriors who had been urgent attack all morning unexpectedly determined themselves defending against an enemy they had written off as defeated. The function reversal came about so quickly that many Numidians did not recognize what was going on till Roman steel become already among them. The slaughter started in earnest whilst Numidian morale cracked beneath stress no wilderness warrior had anticipated. Entire squadrons that had been circling Roman positions like wolves around wounded prey abruptly broke and fled in the direction of distant hills, forsaking wounded comrades and tactical positions that had taken hours to establish. The sound of retreat, horses galloping far away from war, created a mental avalanche that spread quicker than any battlefield messenger. Within Mins, organized Numidian resistance collapsed into man or woman survival. As 16,000 warriors determined that discretion trumped valor while dealing with Romans who refused to die quietly. Caesar seized the instant with predatory instincts that separated genius from competence. As opposed to celebrating survival, he ordered instantaneous pursuit. Roman centuries that have been combating desperately for their lives unexpectedly determined themselves, searching enemies who had terrorized all of them morning. The reversal became so entire, so sudden that many legionaries later claimed they couldn't accept as true with what their personal eyes had been displaying them. They'd long passed from mathematical impossibility to tactical dominance in much less time than it took the African solar to move one diploma across the merciless sky. But the genuine magnitude of Caesar's victory could most effective end up clean whilst the killing ultimately stopped, and the accountants started. Counting our bodies scattered across sand that were yellow at sunrise and changed into crimson via afternoon. The pursuit lasted till the African solar touched the western horizon, reworking Caesar's defensive victory into a slaughter that could echo through military history. Roman centuries, energized by way of their not possible survival, chased fleeing Numidians throughout 12 mi of desolate tract terrain that had preferred cavalry all morning, however now became a trap for warriors. Too panicked to apply their mobility efficiently, the mathematical reversal was wonderful. Through sundown, Caesar's 1,000 guys had killed nearly 4,000 Numidian horsemen at the same time, as dropping fewer than 200 in their very own. Our bodies littered the valley ground and surrounding hills like dark stones scattered throughout yellow sand, marking the direction of a path so entire that witnesses struggled to trust what that they had witnessed. The instant aftermath found out the proper scope of Caesar's tactical revolution. Himself slightly escaped seas, abandoning his command function while it had become clear that organized resistance had collapsed into man or woman flight. His carefully coordinated war plan, months in preparation, had disintegrated in less than an hour once Roman field met Numidian shock in terrain that neutralized cavalry advantages. Most of the enemy lifeless lay chieftains from 6 specific tribes, their ornate guns and armor testament to the political coalition that Caesar had shattered in conjunction with their military formation. King Juba's greatest cavalry, warriors who had never regarded defeat in African war, lay scattered across the battlefield like damaged promises of smooth Roman destruction. The Roman wounded informed their own tale of not possible odds overcome through field and desperation. Men who had taken more than one arrow wounds endured fighting, because retreat meant loss of life and advance presented wish. Centurions stated that soldiers had completed feats of persistence that should have been physically not possible, driven via the information that survival depended entirely on collective action. The prolonged line formation that had seemed suicidal at noon become now hailed as genius, though Caesar privately admitted that desperation had contributed as tactical perception to its fulfillment. Without the terrain constraints that funneled Numidian attacks into Roman killing zones, the outcome could have been catastrophically one of a kind. Here's what the victory intended strategically, past the instant tactical achievement. Caesar had proven that Roman heavy infantry could defeat advanced cavalry. Numbers in open terrain whilst well deployed and led. The psychological effect rippled across North Africa quicker than information of the struggle itself. Tribal chieftains who have been making ready to enroll in Juba's coalition all at once reconsidered their allegiances, whilst reports arrived of Numidian elite cavalry, damaged with the aid of a handful of Roman centuries. The air of secrecy of invincibility that had surrounded African mounted war in view, that Hannibal's time cracked like clay, replaced through renewed admire for Roman military innovation. The captured equipment revealed the scope of enemy training and the significance of their defeat. Roman quartermasters cataloged heaps of arrows, javelins, and cavalry lances abandoned within the course. More importantly, they recovered intelligence documents that exposed the full volume of the conspiracy in opposition to Caesar. Letters from distinctive coordination with Egyptian and Syrian resistance, whilst correspondents found out deliberate naval operations designed to reduce Caesar's African deliver strains. The victory had disrupted greater than a single struggle. It had shattered a complete strategy designed to wreck Caesar's last forces through coordinated pressure from a couple of instructions. The personal transformation in Caesar himself became seen to every subordinate who had witnessed his management at some point of the disaster. The commander, who had appeared nearly informal, approximately African risks, now displayed the focused intensity of someone who understood how close he had come to entire destruction. His orders became more precise, his tactical arrangements extra thorough, his treatment of nearby populations extra calculated to prevent future coalition constructing. The close to catastrophe had taught him that African battle required different approaches than campaigns, training that could prove critical in next operations against and, however possibly, the maximum enormous immediate effect turned into the impact on Roman morale all through Caesar's African military. News of the victory unfolded through his coastal camps like wildfire, remodeling dispirited legions who were wondering their commander's judgment into assured troops prepared to face something enemies Africa should produce. The infantrymen who had survived became instant legends. Their account of tactical innovation and disciplined courage, inspiring whole cohorts that had in no way seen fight. Veterans who had observed Caesar from Gaul talked about as evidence that their commander's legendary fortune extended even to African sand, at the same time as more recruits received self-belief that Roman training could triumph over any odds while well applied. As darkness fell on the battlefield, Caesar stood some of the bodies of enemies who had surrounded his 1,000 men 12 hours earlier, and understood that this victory had changed more than tactical doctrine. It had preserved his African campaign, disrupted enemy method, and validated once more that audacity, mixed with discipline, could acquire mathematical impossibilities that lesser commanders might never strive. The victory had converted Caesar's African marketing campaign from desperate survival into systematic conquest. Inside 6 weeks of the warfare, 3 important cities opened their gates to Roman legions in preference to face siege by using the commander, who had turned impossible odds into tactical doctrine. Fell after unmarried days fighting when Numidian cavalry refused to charge Roman formations that might rent the devastating prolonged line strategies. Utica surrendered without resistance whilst its defenders found out that Caesar had evolved methods for defeating superior cavalry numbers in open terrain. The psychological effect of one afternoon's fighting rippled throughout North Africa like earthquake tremors, shattering alliances that had taken months to forge. The tactical improvements pioneered have become fashionable Roman doctrine inside an era. Military engineers studied Caesar's use of terrain to channel cavalry assaults into infantry killing zones. Workforce officers analyzed how prolonged formations may want to neutralize mobility advantages, whilst properly supported through disciplined reserves. Most significantly, Roman commanders found out that tactical flexibility should triumph over mathematical risks, while desperation turned into calculated aggression. The extended line formation seemed in subsequent battles across Africa, Syria, and eventually on the Germanic frontier, proving that innovation born from disaster should grow to be systematic doctrine. However, have an effect on prolonged past Roman military wondering. Numidian cavalry processes unchanged for hundreds of years, evolved swiftly after their defeat by using Caesar's 1,000. Desolate tracked warriors who had relied merely on mobility and harassment started out incorporating close fight training and coordinated formations designed to counter Roman improvements. The struggle compelled an entire army tradition to evolve or face obsolescence, demonstrating that even traditional blessings may be neutralized by tactical creativity below stress. The personal results for key commanders formed the very last section of Rome's civil wars. Never recovered from the mental surprise of being by means of his former mentor, the usage of concepts he understood. His next tactical choices became increasingly conservative, contributing to Republican defeats at and in the end at Munda, in which Caesar's veterans proved unstoppable. Suicide at Utica stemmed partly from his recognition that Roman military superiority had grown to be unshakable after. Caesar proved that Republican forces couldn't shape Caesarian innovation, even when supported by the finest allied troops inside the historic world. The battle's legacy lived inside the infantrymen who survived it, and the testimonies they told for decades in a while. Veterans of fashion the spine of legions that conquered Egypt, fought at, and subsequently mounted the Principate underneath Augustus. Their knowledge of tactical innovation, beneath not possible stress, became casual doctrine surpassed down via centurion ranks. Whilst later Roman armies faced comparable challenges, they carried out training discovered on African sand in which 1,000 men had proved that field ought to multiply force more successfully than numbers could weigh down schooling. Here's what Navy historians apprehend approximately broader importance. The conflict that tactical innovation could emerge from disaster, whilst commanders possessed both the know-how to recognize opportunity and the authority to implement radical answers. Instantly, Caesar's success required not just private braveness, but systematic understanding of infantry skills, cavalry barriers, and terrain advantages that most generals would have overlooked underneath pressure. The extended line formation labored, because Caesar understood Roman strengths well sufficient to threat the entirety on tactical theories that existed nowhere in military manuals. Present-day staff schools nevertheless look at as the precise instance of protecting action, converted into offensive victory via management. That refused to simply accept mathematical inevitability. The principles Caesar applied, the use of enemy power in opposition to enemy assumptions whilst maximizing friendly benefits in surprising contexts, stay applicable anywhere inferior forces face superior numbers. The battle proves that tactical genius can emerge from determined instances, while training meets opportunity inside the crucible of combat that checks every assumption approximately what is possible. The philosophical coronary heart of echoes through Navy history. Like a regular reminder that human will can overcome mathematical certainty while implemented with specific understanding of and obstacles. Caesar's 1,000 guys confronted 16,000 enemies, now not because they were braver or stronger. However, due to the fact they have been better led, better trained, and higher able to adapt conventional techniques to unprecedented demanding situations. They proved that not possible odds emerge as feasible, whilst tactical innovation meets disciplined execution in situations that call for each. On January 4th, 46 CE Julius Caesar watched 1,000 Roman squaddies show that mathematical impossibility yields to tactical genius when desperation is converted into calculated audacity, and in doing so confirmed that the finest victories emerge not from advanced numbers, however, from superior thinking applied below strain that would spoil regular guys. This mysterious journey ends here, but stay tuned for more untold stories in our next video. Subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon so you don't miss any new stories. Thank you and see you.